welcome to NeoCon Talks. The next presentation will be Teamwork Wins, Culture as Strategy. As architecture and design firms race ever faster to meet client needs, leadership rooted in people, purpose, and culture has emerged as a clear competitive advantage. Diving into this topic, we have, slide, Janet Simpson, President and CEO at TVS. As the third president to serve TVS since it opened in 1968, Janet Simpson aims to design better human experiences, places where people can thrive, grow, learn, and flourish. She has been a trailblazer for transformative growth and innovation during her tenure at TVS, expanding both its global reach and design impact. So let's welcome Janet to the stage. Clap, clap, clap. You can take this one. Thanks.
The places where life happens. This industry designs those places. And just think about where you woke up this morning and all of the environments that you've moved through to get here. And every single one of those environments has been very thoughtfully designed by someone, designed by a team of people. And maybe you walked through an environment or multiple environments that you had designed or that your firm has designed. Shaping those environments is a magnificent part of this industry. We don't shape all of them, but some of the most impactful ones. And I've spent my career as an interior designer in this impactful and magnificent industry. And the longer I spend in this industry, with about 20 years practicing as an interior designer, working with clients, and the last 10 as a CEO leading a commercial architecture and interior design firm, the more convinced I am of two things. One is that we do not apply the same standard that we use for designing projects for our clients as we do for shaping our own work environment and how we work as an industry together. Because the second one is we as an industry really do have the power to shape how people live. So that gap between the standard we use when we're shaping how people live and working with our clients and the standard we use for shaping the environment that we work in is that gap that I want to explore a little bit today. And it starts with a question. Why don't we design our organizations the same way we design for our clients? Because the places where life happens and the firms and industry where design happens, they all deserve the same attention. And that gap of why we would take different attention from one to the other, I want you to think about what happens when we start to design for a client and when we start to work on a built environment problem. We listen deeply and intently. We ask questions that no one's considered, and then we form teams. We go through a lot of options. We go through so many more meetings. And then we deliver something more considered than any one person could have thought of. But then, if you think about the opposite of that, when we're working on something that's really more about our work environment or our firm or our organizations or how this industry's organized, think about what tends to happen then, because we tend to act with a little bit less intention and consideration. And we can tend to do things just because that's the way that they've always been done, and often because we don't feel like we have time to really consider a new way of doing them. And that moment when we have that shift of intention, it took me a long time to realize that is not a people problem. That is a systems problem. And that's a systems design problem. In design problems, they have solutions. Next slide. So this is the phrase that unlocked everything for me. Organizations do what they are organized to do. I heard that phrase, and it absolutely changed the way I thought about leading. And I'll say it again. Organizations do what they are, in fact, organized to do. And at TVS, we were organized, like many firms are, to deliver thoughtful work for our clients. Every action, every system, every process, tightly calibrated toward delivering work for our clients. We were, we are, and we will continue to be excellent at that. But the work of advancing the firm's priorities, or all of the things that we needed to do to be part of this industry, they needed more of a structure in order to really be able to help the firm evolve. And so we started asking ourselves, what would it look like if we started to design our organization, our firm, the same way that we design for our clients? And that led us to a design solution for the organization that I'll unpack for you a little bit today. Next slide. Before we started changing structure at TVS, we had a very predictable rhythm to our quarterly offsite meetings. And that was that we would be thinking about all of the very strategic things that any healthy business needs to think about, your pipeline of work, of talent, your brand. And we would come up with some really great things to work on. But then inevitably, someone would ask, all right, who has the capacity to take this on? And that's when the room goes quiet, absolutely quiet for a minute while everyone's considering their project load. And then maybe someone volunteers and thinking, I'm not sure I'm going to do this, but I'll volunteer. Sometimes it fell back on me. But the reality is that the priorities that really would move the firm forward didn't have a place to land because the organization was doing exactly what it was organized to do. So next slide. So we did start to redesign the firm because we said we need to do two things. We need to be able to work in the firm and on the firm, and we need a structure for working on the firm and in the firm. So we came up with a new structure design, but before we did that, we launched into a 5-year bold solutions plan for the firm. Intentional transformation was the goal. And instead of starting with systems, we started with mindsets first. We had 10 transformative mindsets that we called out and named and committed to changing from legacy mindsets. And TVS is a firm that will soon be 60 years old, so we had some legacy in our system. So we called out these 10 mindsets to a legacy mindset to a transformative mindset that would help us to push the firm forward. And examples of 2 of those mindsets are we really wanted to move from talking about that the best idea from the team wins to the best thinking from the whole ecosystem is going to inform the best solution. The other from to mindset was we're going to move from thinking about technology as a tool that adds cost to thinking of technology as a team member that adds value. These mindsets set the foundation, and then we built the structure. We created a firm team ecosystem, not committees, dedicated teams for each of the firm priorities that we needed to advance. And those teams stay in place from year to year. And the next thing that we did was we created what we call the dual accountability, which is everyone at TVS is responsible and committed to working on the firm in their respective roles, but then working on the firm in the firm team ecosystems, but in the firm in their respective role. And that commitment to working in the firm and on the firm, but then having a structure that you could see and understand for how we were going to work on the firm through that firm team ecosystem is part of what started to change that dynamic. So that now in the quarterly offsite meetings, when we talk about the firm priorities, the question isn't who can take this on. The question now has become, how can your firm team advance this? Or what has your firm team done to advance this? And it's very transparent through the whole firm what the priorities are, who's working on them, and how we're advancing them. So next slide. And this leads me to the most important thing that we've really learned. And that is that culture isn't declared, it's designed. And I want to be very specific about the culture I'm talking about. It's not the culture of a feeling in the room or a values poster or a perks program. This is the culture of how work actually moves, how you start to progress through a system where a number of people can come together and work through an ecosystem of a shared purpose and advance work together. That is teamwork as strategy. And that's what this talk is about. And it's not declared, it absolutely is designed. You can't retreat your way to a culture of collaboration. And you can't talk your way to a culture of accountability. And you can't make a values poster or a values statement that is going to change how a decision gets made on a random Tuesday. That's the result of culture as design. And this is where I want to kind of widen the lens, because what's true for one firm is true for the industry. Next slide. At TVS, we've made a commitment to work in the firm and on the firm, but then we've expanded it, and we've also made a commitment to work both in the industry and on the industry, because this industry is in a moment of real disruption. Technology is changing what we design and how we design it. This industry has challenges in sustainability and how people work and how communities gather that are more complex than it's ever faced. And this industry is designed to face those challenges one project at a time, one client at a time, one firm at a time. And that's not enough for what's coming. This industry will thrive when it acts like what it truly is. It's a community of professionals, of people coming together with a common purpose. And so the work that we need to do together is to take that same intention, that same ability that we have to design and shape the places where people live, to design and shape the industry that we work on. Next slide. So I didn't come here today to sell you on TVS's system of working in the firm and on the firm, but I did come to ask one question. And that is, if you take a look at the firm or the organization that you work in, think deeply about how it's organized and how it works, not on paper, but how it's actually organized and actually works. And then ask, is it doing what is needed? And if the answer is no, then design something better. We know how to do that. We do it for our clients every day. And we are excellent at it. We can apply that same thinking to advancing the industry. So the challenge is that we need to think, who are we designing for? And as we move through our careers, think about this industry that we are in and how magnificent it is and how much we have the ability to shape people's lives and ask, how can I work in it? How am I working in the industry, working on the industry, but also working for it? Because the future of this industry is ours to design. Thank you.